If I'm to summarize my experience with the Redmi Note 11s, well, it's been mostly great. In fact, if I tell you all the positives and negatives of owning this phone and nothing more, you might be compelled to get this phone, and I might be compelled to recommend it as well. But unfortunately, the 11s doesn't live in an isolated world. It's part of the Note 11 series that consists of 4 different models, sandwiched by 2 bigger and more expensive brothers and 1 cheaper sibling. But before we get started, here's a short message from our sponsor. CDKeyOffer specializes in delivering cheap and legitimate software and game codes. If you ever need a Windows 10 Pro or a Microsoft Office key, you can buy one at a very cheap price. To do so, just visit CDKeyOffer.com. Search for Windows 10 and choose a suitable copy for you, but in my case, I always go for a professional copy. Before making a payment, make sure to type in the RC20 code for an exclusive 30% off discount. After that, you can choose your preferred payment method. You will receive the code via an email that redirects you to the website of CDKeyOffer, and from there you can get your Windows 10 key. Since my Windows 10 copy is already activated, I just can simply change my product key to the new one that I just bought. If you need a Microsoft Office key, the steps are pretty much the same. Just make sure to type in the RC20 code for an exclusive 30% off discount. CDKeyOffer provides permanently valid keys with 30 days of return and exchange period. You can check out more deals in the video description below. So the Redmi Note 11s starts at $249 and goes up to $299. The catch though is that the base model only comes with 6GB RAM and 64GB storage, while the variant above it doubles the storage to 128. And lastly, the top model pairs the larger storage with 8GB RAM, which is the model I'm using for this review, and the model you should be going for if you're planning to get the 11s. I don't know yet what's going to be the price of the 11s here in the Philippines since the official launch is on February 10, but my bet is that it's going to be close to the original price of the Redmi Note 10s. So for those prices, what exactly are you getting from the Note 11s? Well, like what the title indicates, I see this phone as the smaller version of last year's Redmi Note 10 Pro, which is actually nice to see since I found the Note 10 Pro a bit unwieldy with one hand. However, a smaller form factor also means some downgrades in certain areas. Not major downgrades, but still downgrades nonetheless. Starting with the display, the Note 11s is rocking the same 6.43-inch AMOLED display from last year's Note 10s. The difference is that it's brighter at 700 nits and faster thanks to the 90Hz refresh rate. I'm not complaining. The new panel is plenty bright, especially at this price point. I never had any problems reading text and viewing images under the sun, and the 90Hz display still lets you see the smoothness of a faster screen, all the while keeping the battery consumption in check. What I noticed between 120Hz and 90Hz phones is that switching back to 60Hz from 90 is less painful to the eyes if ever you want to go back just to save battery. I remember switching between 120 and 60 on the Realme GT, and the animations were abnormally stuttery to my eyes. But on the 11s, 60Hz still looks smooth and acceptable. There is one quirk though: the display over-sharpens any photo or video that gets shown on the screen. The regular users out there won't notice this over-sharpening effect, but for those who are critical about the display of their phone, it's very noticeable. It doesn't make the viewing experience bad per se, but it's a bit annoying at times, especially when the effect is very obvious. I don't think it's necessary for Xiaomi to over-sharpen the images since this is a 1080p display on a small screen. It even supports HD playback on Netflix, so they shouldn't worry about the screen looking subpar. Oh, and one more thing, the proximity sensor. It doesn't seem to work when in a call. On the design, the 11s is using a boxier frame than previous phone, a la iPhone. However, the chamfered edges of the frame provide a slightly smoother feel in the hands and prevent the phone from being too sharp in the edges. But the boxier frame isn't as one-hand friendly as the Redmi Note 10. The color that we have here is graphite gray, but you can also get this in pearl white and twilight blue. But for the gray color, it's using a matte finish all around, which also makes the phone slippery in the hand. The front is protected by Gorilla Glass 3, but the back is made of plastic, considering how lightweight this phone is. However, it's honestly hard to tell at first whether the back is made of glass or plastic due to the matte finish it's sporting. Either way, if you're a case person, this won't matter to you. The fingerprint scanner is embedded onto the power button on the right side. I've seen faster scanners than this, but it's still fast and accurate for what it is. You also have a stereo speaker setup, but in my testing, the quality is more like a single firing. It's not very loud and gets easily overpowered by ambient noise, and the overall quality is on the tinny side. And the reason for that is that the speaker up top doesn't provide too much support. You can barely hear anything from it once you cover the bottom speaker. On the bright side, there's still a headphone jack here. The USB-C charging port supports up to 33 watts, which gets the 5000 mAh battery from 0 to 100% in just an hour, which is still plenty fast for those who are still using 25 watts and below. Overall, the build of the 11S is no slouch at this price. It has everything you need in terms of port selection and expandability, and it can also survive water splashes thanks to the IP53 rating. So inside the 11S is the Helio G96. It is essentially the Helio G95, but with a slightly faster Mali GPU. And it also means there's no 5G support here. When it comes to day-to-day performance, the 11S breezes through everything like it's nothing. App launches are fast, loading times are decently fast, and I never had an instance where I need to wait for a couple of seconds for a thing to load. Gaming also seems to be a smooth experience here. Given the overheating history of MediaTek chips, the G96 is far from its predecessors. It only gets warm at best when you push it. I'm actually even surprised that it managed to play Genshin Impact in medium resolution with the rest of the settings in low, allowing me to enjoy the game at a reasonable 25 to 50 frames. Given this is a mid-range chipset, some slight stutters or frame drops are expected from this phone, but it's not as bad as the Redmi Note 10 Pro with 6GB RAM. And I've been telling this since last year, you want to get at least 8GB RAM with the latest Xiaomi phones, as they tend to eliminate most of the stutters and jitters in the UI. And speaking of UI, the 11S is running MIUI 13 out of the box. While that's the latest version of MIUI, it's not based on the latest Android version, which is Android 12. This is still based on Android 11, but in my experience, MIUI 13 felt great here, albeit with some minor bugs to fix. There's only one bug where I had to restart the device just to make the phone run again. There's a random instance wherein when you play Netflix, it would get stuck on the loading screen, but with the sound playing in the background. The phone was totally frozen, I couldn't even get the display to turn off, so I had to force reset the device. Happened to me a couple of times. Some minor bugs include the camera app sometimes getting stuck in high exposure, so what you would see on the screen is an overblown image of what you're capturing, and 108 megapixel images loading just the top half of the image. I expect these things to get sorted out in the future updates, but that's just me being hopeful. Overall, MIUI 13 on the 11S is usable at its state. I also noticed the majority of my notifications are finally coming in on time without having me play with the settings. Receiving timely notifications is very important, so please keep up the good work, Xiaomi. But despite MIUI 13 looking like an iterative update more than a major one, there are a couple of things that I think are worth noting. For starters, Xiaomi has added this sidebar feature that also integrates the previous video toolbox from older MIUI versions, so depending on which app you want the sidebar to appear, you can set a number of apps that you want for quick access and it'll appear as a pop-up window including games. Yes, including games. But if you're watching a video, the sidebar will show the video toolbox as well. Game Turbo, Xiaomi's game launcher, also gets an update. So if you run a game via Game Turbo, the sidebar will provide you a new interface for your current game, as well as additional gaming options. But the two major additions here are the built-in voice changer and the timer. So you can choose between these options to change your voice into and preview the voice just to make sure that your voice actually changed. But for the timer, it's just a simple timer that stays in the foreground and has 4 instances. So other than those two, the rest of MIUI 13 is identical to MIUI 12. It's also worth noting that the battery life on the 11S is good. I consistently get 6 hours of screen time a day with almost an hour of gaming on the side. I'm very impressed with the battery performance. I once left it overnight and it only ate up 2% after 7 hours connected to the Wi-Fi. Okay, last but definitely not least, the cameras. Based on the spec sheet, the Note 11S is sporting the same sensors as the Note 10 Pro. So that's 108 megapixel main, 8 megapixel ultra wide, but with a pair of 2 megapixel for macro and depth. There's also a 16 megapixel selfie camera, which impressed me a lot, whether it's stabilization, sharpness, detail, except for the skin tones that tend to be on the magenta side, but otherwise it's a very good selfie camera. The main cameras, I would say, very good in photos but above average in videos. So the photos, when you give them plenty of lighting, can come out really good, especially with close-up subjects. The 108 megapixel sensor can give you a creamy bokeh effect. But as usual, the sensor does struggle a bit indoors, but not to the extent where photos are unusable. The effect of night mode is subtle, it only restores the details in the highlights and makes the photo sharper than regular mode. Now for videos. They are usable at best, at least for me. It's hard to get a good video quality even when strong lighting is present, and the stabilization can get jumpy at times. I mean, I understand that this phone doesn't cost too much, so the expectation shouldn't be that high. But we're talking about a 108 megapixel sensor. But to be fair, the 11S is capped at 1080p at 30 frames. There's no 4K option that adds more details to the videos, and unfortunately, the camera ISP of the G96 only supports 2K at 30 frames, so I wouldn't be holding my breath for future software updates if I were you. And one more thing, if you take advantage of the Pro mode in the camera app, there's an option for you to use focus peaking and exposure verification, or Zebra. I just think it's nice Pro features additions to an affordable camera phone. Now, going back to the awkward middle child situation, the 11S again is not a bad phone. It's just that it doesn't have any specialty to offer. Its bigger siblings have the fastest displays and charging, while the smaller sibling is the cheapest of the bunch. You really have to be specific with your needs when it comes to purchasing the Redmi Note 11S. But then again, having options is a nice privilege to have. And at a time when stocks are fluctuating due to logistics caused by the pandemic, the Note 11S is a decent option as an alternative to your supposed first option. Just keep in mind that there's no 5G support here. So that's it. Drop a sub or like if you feel supporting the channel, and until the next one, stay safe.